In order to get a high band in the speaking test, it is important to develop your ideas in a logical way. You can do this using connecting words and phrases. Watch these examples.
Well, I think on the whole, I would prefer to live in a big city. Well, firstly, there are more job opportunities. On top of that, the standard of living is higher and the infrastructure is more developed. Also, there are more places to go shopping. So in short, lots of advantages. On the other hand, I think there are a few important drawbacks worth mentioning. First of all, big cities tend to be more polluted because of all the cars. Secondly, they can be very noisy. What else? Regarding transport, big cities can be very stressful. For example, my country's capital city has a really crowded metro system. In fact, I've heard it's one of the most stressful metro systems in the world. So, yeah, there are lots of disadvantages, but I'd still prefer to live in a city.
Here are some more connectors you can use in your speaking. Use well to introduce a remark or give yourself time to think.
Who is my favorite family member? Well, I need to think about that one.
Use so or therefore to introduce a logical result. Therefore is more formal than so.
Living in a big city has lots of advantages, so I'll prefer to live there.
Use basically to introduce the most important aspect of something and as a conversation filler.
Basically, there are 3 reasons why I'd like to live in a big city.
Don't use it in formal writing, however. Use however or yet to make a contrast.
I agree with that opinion. However, I don't know if it will be true in the future. I agree with that opinion. Yet, I don't know if it will be true in the future.
Though is used to make a contrast, and it normally goes at the end of the sentence.
Living in a big city has lots of advantages. I'd still prefer to live in a small town, though.
Use, in other words, to simplify or summarize what you just said before.
In big cities, there are more offices and shops. In other words, there is more work.
Use if we're talking to introduce a specific aspect of a topic. For example, if the examiner asks you if you prefer living in a big or small city, and you want to talk about one aspect of living in a big city, for example, shopping and entertainment, you can say this.
If we're talking shopping and entertainment, I'd prefer to live in a big city.
You can also use as far as something is concerned when introducing one aspect of a topic. It is more formal than if we're talking.
As far as shopping is concerned, it is much better to live in a big city than a small town.
You can use eventually when telling a story to say what happens after a long time or after many problems. The meaning is similar to in the end.
We drove for 2 hours trying to find the hotel. Eventually, we gave up and decided to stay at a hostel.
You can use on top of that, or what's more, to introduce additional points in your argument or story.
The hotel was awful. On top of that, the weather was cold and wet. The hotel was awful. What's more, the weather was cold and wet.
On top of that and what's more are more informal than in addition, furthermore and moreover. So don't use them in formal writing. You can use actually to give an unexpected or surprising response.
Actually, I'm still a student.
You can also use actually to modify a previous statement. For example, if you said something that is slightly inaccurate and you want to be more precise.
I used to get up at 7 a.m. Actually, it was around 6:30.
You can also use in fact as a modifier.
I used to get up at 7 a.m. In fact, it was around 6:30.
If you're aiming for a very high band, you can use the idiom to cut a long story short when you want to stop telling someone all the details about something that happened and just get to the main facts. In American English, this is to make a long story short.
To cut a long story short, I arrived home after midnight.
Use on the whole or in general to make a general statement.
On the whole, I think the food in my country is healthy. In general, I think the food in my country is healthy.
Use overall to make a final concluding statement.
Overall, it was a fantastic holiday.
Instead of overall, you can also use all in all, on the whole, or all things considered. Use for example or for instance to give an example.
Big cities have better public transport. For instance, in my city there are trams, metro systems, buses and trains.
You can use alternatively to provide an alternative idea.
In my town you can get to the city centre by tram. Alternatively, you can take the bus.